So I've asked the question.
With me, you're trifling with me.
No, I'm not, sir.
Please, you are. You are. You've done it repeatedly,
Electioneering.
and I'm not going to accept that. It may be the last meeting, but please don't just carry on when I say ask the question.
But I have an answer, sir.
Well,
We gave the answer when Cathy asked the question.
I don't, Councillor Walker, I don't have a lot to add. We don't employ those sorts of people at council. That is a decision that's been made. We rely on expert other sources.
best practice.
We've got a best practice technical reference group. We've got a weed management political advisory group, both of which you're aware of and one of which you're part of.
Yes.
So we are looking to listen into the community. We're looking to listen in to the expertise that represents a global view. We're relying on the medical officer of health. We're relying on the EPA and others. You've had them to this committee and to working groups. So I can't answer it any other way than that. I am aware the community has a view on it. We always look to take that into account, and that's why that opportunity is available at the local board level to make decisions around their view on spraying in local parks. And where they choose that they don't want that, then we allow that to occur. So we're trying to adapt constantly on how we handle these issues, and we recognise there's a balance between the science and the community will. And so that's my answer.
Thank you. Councillor Watson. Councillor Watson?
Sorry, I've got an amendment up there.
A question. You got a question?
No,
you
not
haven't?
a-
Okay.
no, I've got an amendment.
I think there's a couple of other questions then.
I haven't got a question. I was just
No,
going
any
to
other
speak to-
questions?
Yep.
Yeah, Councillor Fletcher.
My question is to Dean Kimpton, and I'm trying to follow this because as Chair of Parks, I've been following it closely. As a board member of Auckland Transport, I've been following this closely. And I've got to the point that I'm probably as confused as the public as to where we are going on this. So, Mr. Kimpton, what I really want to know, and I'll give you my position, which is I'm putting my conflict on the table in terms of legacy Auckland City. I'm someone who uses glyphosate in appropriate conditions in terms of biodiversity, use it out on Motutapu, places like that. But in residential areas, I don't believe it's appropriate, and that was the policy of the Legacy Auckland City. Now, I'm of the view that we need to have, council is one family, we need to have one policy on this, and I understood that that was where the Mayor was wanting to go with his desire for a review. So the question to you is, what consultation did you have with the Mayor before he came out with that desire for a review? And what work would you be enabling as the senior lead officer on this in terms of trying to get a one council family policy? Because you're hearing consultation fatigue. We've seen these people, they keep coming to all the various arms of council. Somehow we've got to try and do this better and move away from the confusion. So I really need some guidance from you to know what to support today. Were you supportive of the Mayor? Was it on policy advice from yourself that he came up with the need for a review? How did we get to the point that we're at now?
It's a little bit unfair for us to...
So my support, or otherwise the Mayor's immaterial. The Mayor responded to the challenge, the public challenge in the moment on the day. And so that's fine. As far as I'm concerned, that was a call that was made, political guidance given and received. But probably more important is for me just to step through what we have in place and what we've been doing, and that might give you some assurance about the approach underlying this, the original report. There was a policy adopted. You're all part of that. It was a public process. Since then, we've been looking at operational guidelines and practice. There's been a number of challenges on that. Our objective is to make sure they're in line with the policy and also adapt where we can to what the local communities wish. And as part of that policy review, there were a number of aspects that were additional recommendations sought to be put in place. One was a political advisory group, which is now in place and operating, and my recommendation is that that continues, so that group, its membership may change, but that group be reappointed, so it can continue its work of review and monitoring, and a best practice technical reference group also be put in place to make sure that whatever we did, and remember we've got 200 weed species in Auckland, and they all respond to different sorts of treatment and management, and glyphosate is just one tool, but so is mechanical weed pulling, etc., etc. The best practice technical reference group consists of a broad cross-section of expertise to make sure that we are delivering best practice in the way that we manage weeds in the Auckland environment. And that is its purpose. So between those two, I think we actually have a strong platform for dealing with these issues.
Yep.
There'll always be some public debate.
So best practice I accept,
Yep.
but is the purpose, is where the officers are trying to assist us here to developing a common policy across the council family? Because I think that's where we've got a lot of problems, and I think we need to have one policy.
You have a common policy right now. You have a weed management policy in place that was adopted in 2013, but this is a contentious issue. And
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Your questions, Councillor Filipino?
I have, Chair, and one is to you in regards to the recommendation. Are you saying with the recommendation that the review was not required and the option that you're suggesting, and I'll reserve my right to speak, but the option that you're recommending is to reappoint and continue to monitor and review reappoint the advisory group? That's the first question. Cool, thank you. Second question, and this is from the Stats New Zealand. There's 67 TLAs currently in New Zealand. How many have stopped the use of glyphosate within their weed management operations?
I don't know the answer personally. Paula, do you know the answer?
Excuse me.
Okay, so look, the feedback is that we're not aware of any that have permanently stopped or stopped. Or
Order.
so there'll be a number of
We're not
national
aware.
bodies
We're not
and
aware.
TLAs. We're not aware of any that have stopped at this stage. That could be wrong. We haven't asked. Thank you. So Christchurch,
Sorry.
Okay,
Thank you.
there's your answer.
so there's not that many, but they have.
Apparently Christchurch.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So, if no other questions, I'll now go to
A
Councillor.
question about Auckland Transport. It just came up in the debate. Are Auckland Transport obliged to follow our policy?
The policy that we have is a council family policy.
Yes.
Right. So if we today, and we're about to talk about moratorium, it would be required of Auckland Transport
Absolutely.
to obey that
Absolutely.
moratorium.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, you wish to speak to this?
Well, I have my amendment up.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to rule the amendment out of order because it is a matter of significance. The
Money.
implementation and the implications of a moratorium would have considerable financial issues for this council, because we're talking about millions of dollars in relation to the budgets which are already set at the present time. And this council has a resolution of the governing body which goes back to February this year, stating that in the election period there will not be any decisions made where they are matters of significance.
That's
So I have to make a decision, and that is the decision that I'm making on that amendment.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll speak to the motion. That's very disappointing to hear, Mr. Chair,
Well,
because
that's the rules of that we follow, and we follow resolutions of the governing body.
okay, I've got that. We have a rather, extraordinary state of affairs here, where the recommendations as set out on the agenda have been pulled at the last minute, and we have this this replacement that calls for a reappointment of this advisory group and a review of the implementation of Auckland Council's weed management policy. Now, I suppose that would be all very fine if we weren't approaching 2017, and this policy was passed in 2013. So one would have to say at the very least that a review of implementation is a little late in the piece after nearly 4 years of this policy being in place, and especially when you look at the objectives, because if you look at the objectives, they are very clear, and I know our report mentioned ambiguity. There is no ambiguity here, and I think this has been something that's been identified by a number of the speakers here today. We have, and I'm not going to go through all of the objectives, but I'll go through the key ones: ensure best practice in weed management and vegetation control, minimise agrochemical use, minimise non-target effects of agrochemical use, ensure public health and safety, protect and enhance the environment, and so forth and so on. There's 8 of them, and overwhelmingly, except the last one that makes a reference to value for money, they are targeted at reducing agrochemical use. Now, what you're proposing here, Mr. Chair, is to go into yet another round, another, the cynic might say, another waiting period or deferral period or playing for time. It's almost like something out of a Yes Minister script where Humphrey comes in and calls for another review or another delay, which takes the heat out of things. This item to do with chemical control has been before us for quite some time. And in that intervening time, what the council has done, it has not only not implemented its policy, it has gone the other way. So instead of minimising agrochemical use, we have maximised it. We have decided that all our parks, largely all our parks, are going to now have, are now, currently as I speak, have glyphosate sprayed in them. That didn't exist before. It now exists now. So we have the curious contradiction where we have a policy that seeks to minimise, while on the ground, and this is what we're talking about here in terms of implementation, we're increasing the use. And we're increasing the use to a magnitude that has not been experienced before in any legacy council and not within the Auckland Council as a whole, in the history of the Auckland Council. So I don't know what confidence people in the public are meant to have with yet another delaying tactic of reappointing yet another committee and reviewing the implementation. You haven't implemented it, so we would have to say that fundamentally there's a question of good faith here, and that faith is totally lacking. So I would say people don't have any confidence in the ability of this council to do what that implies that it might do at some future point. So given all those things, I think we're in a bit of a quandary here, Mr. Chair, because we have a clear public message, not just from the people that spoke here today, but through the annual plan process, through local boards, through councillor representation, that want this implemented immediately. It's not happening. What's happening on the ground is that this is being thwarted behind the scenes. We're not looking at items to do with cost, to do with effectiveness. Instead, we're playing for time, and all this resolution does once again is to delay it out. So I would suggest, Mr. Chair, that a moratorium in public places and in urban environments should be immediate if we were going to implement our objectives as stated in the weed management policy. Clearly, this resolution as presented does nothing of the sort. So this isn't going away. In fact, it's increasing. We don't just have the people that have turned up today. We have a widespread concern in the community.
Thank you.
In our latest subdivision on the Hibiscus Coast, I'm now confronted with a large group of young mothers in this very affluent, upmarket suburb who are now agitating to eliminate the use of glyphosate in their children's playgrounds.